loads of rubbish in that mug. I'm halfway through having lunch.
Forest in the cups.
I'm sure loads of other people just go, it's got a bit of forest in it.
Don't worry about it.
That won't be a problem.
Forest coffee. Forest coffee, forest tea.
We had one of those dropout sessions today.
We did.
We started with, as last week we discussed the rain, but it's not raining today, and we both said afterwards, wasn't that cold?
It's not that cold for us.
But
compared to yesterday.
For the needs of the children that were in that group, we started with, what do we have today, 10, 12?
12, yeah.
And then, it was almost, you just look round and you go, oh, crikey. I think we had 3, possibly 4 by the end.
Yeah.
You know, and there's no judgment on that. We're not scowling as they walk away. You're just going, cool.
Yeah,
come back,
you watch those children that you know really well, who are the kids who are like, hello Lewis, hello Gemma, can you come and play with me over here? And like, you know, and they just are sitting there silently, and you go, hey, do you want to do this? They're like, no, and they just go like huddling up to their parent, just a completely different personality, and you go, yeah, you are not in a good place, you need to go home.
It's the bit that makes me, I don't believe in Maslow's hierarchy, right? I don't think it's something that applies, but I can see...
whenever you say that, you get a little old fight.
Right. But
can you explain why? Because otherwise people will fight.
We'll explain it in another podcast, but what I was going to say was I feel like that experience is when people go, they didn't have their needs met. And that's true. I just don't think the hierarchy bears up to it. It doesn't, rubber hits the road kind of thing. I think it's a lovely idea. Oh, maybe I will go into it then.
Go for it.
I think it's a lovely idea in planning, in theory, but I don't. There are people who are self-actualized, who are struggling to get food. Mm-hmm. There are people who, there are people who don't have the freedom to, I don't know, express their own views, but they're not happy just because they're warm. I don't agree with it being a triangle. I think they're a collection of needs you have, but I don't think they're hierarchically dependent. I'm well clever. I said hierarchically dependent.
Woo!
University, mate. I've done a degree in it.
It's like the time I used the word heteroglossic. And I read back through my my master's dissertation, and I go, heteroglossic. Blimmin' hell. It means many-tongued. But why I was using it, I have no idea.
You're just slagging someone off.
No. I was talking about learning in some way, innit? Talking about some kind of learning and going as heteroglossic in it. But I look back at it now and go, yeah, different person wrote that.
Have we covered it up? We said clever things, but then we covered it with poor accents.
Yeah,
so
it's fine.
Okay, it's good.
Modesty.
Right. So, this is the closest we've got so far to me coaxing you into a school versus no school debate, which has been it's still looming. But what I sent you this week was John Taylor Gatto, or Gatto, I don't know. He's American, and everyone that has talked about him to me is American. So, John Taylor Gatto. He died last October. He is a very prominent person in the home education world, but he comes from a teaching background. And what we have got, and I'll put a link to in the podcast notes, is we've got his acceptance speech for his, now I think it was the New York Teacher of the Year, whether that's the city or the state, because he won both in different years.
Okay.
So it's worth going into this with a bit of background to him, that he is being given an award by the state for state teaching and how outstanding they think his work is. So I think that's the first thing that's worth discussing, is he's not like a lot of people who are pro home ed, who either were home eded themselves or have some kind of if you were really far on the spectrum, you might say like conspiracy nut kind of vibe about like they're brainwashing us, man, and they're doing whatever. He is firmly in, American state education. Yeah. So caveats I think are, he is a teacher, but he's in an American school and an American system, and all of his writing is about the American system, which I think I've said in a podcast before makes his writing quite interesting, because in the grand scheme of things, America's education system was written down from day dot, whereas countries, Britain, we just kind of schooling, I'm sure you could find the first school, but schooling kind of evolved over time, whereas because of how America developed as a country, there was a point where they wrote down, this will be the school system.
Yeah, I found that quite interesting in the article about the history of American education, and it almost being like this part of the Civil War in terms of like people going, no, you're not going to take my kids, you're not going to take them into school, I don't believe in it, and then these kids being rounded up and marched into state education against their will and against their family's will. And
that's part of, I think, what comes from, I mean, neither of us are American, but the vibe that I get is that a lot of people emigrated to America to set up new lives free of religious persecution or with the freedom to persecute. Lots of people moved out there because they wanted to be puritanical and they weren't allowed to do that in their European countries. So lots of people who went to America had a strong view of what they thought children and society needed to learn. And so then when you go, right, statewide, nationally, we're going to put this in place, it's an interesting conversation, I think.
And I wonder if there are similarities in some parts of Britain in terms of education as well. In my village in Devon, we've just been doing a bit of local history research on the village school, which doesn't exist anymore. The place where the school was is still there, and the house where the teacher lived is still there, and it's still called Old Schoolhouse. But the teacher had to keep a school log, and interestingly, her pay was linked to attendance.
Okay.
Kind of like almost now with teachers their pay and progression being linked to outcomes. So she had to keep a log legally of who was there, what happened in the day, if people are away absent, why were they absent. So it makes quite interesting reading. And so the beginning of it is like, day one of school, all of the children are very backwards and unruly, and there's 2 kids that get sent home in disgrace for lighting a fire in the playground. And so you imagine these like feral village children, they're all children of miners. So they've just been working in the mines basically, or agricultural labouring, depending on the season. And then on one day it's like, no children present, all children working in fields or out warting, which I had to look up, which is in the woods foraging for whortleberries. That's why none of the kids came to school. And I wonder if the parents had that similar view of like, oh God, I have to send my kids to school and I need their help to live. And this is a very poor community, and this woman drops in from somewhere else, no one knows her, and here she is trying to impose spelling on our children. They're never going to need that. What the heck?
That's the thing. I mean, this is. We're digging into the history, and what I would say is, if you are interested in the history of education, not just in America, but in sort of as a broad look at it, is to look up Gatto's other works. So he's got Dumbing Us Down, which is a very good book, and also I can't remember the other one now, but I will put some links to his books in there, and they're very in-depth but very accessible, so they're all written from a very logical kind of, well, let's look at this and let's talk about this. So we've highlighted some paragraphs in his speech.
But he is doing the speech, as you said, when he is still a teacher.
He is still a teacher.
He's a teacher in the States.
In the state education, and it's 1991. Okay. Or possibly 1990. So we're talking about 20 years ago. So there's some bits, there's one bit in here in particular that I think needs, not challenging, but needs, it doesn't stand up maybe 20 years on. But so, if I'm going down, and there's basically this paragraph here, he's talking to me, that's how I feel. He's talking about how, in his experience, school is becoming increasingly irrelevant for not only the jobs that we have then, but also the communities that we have now then. I'm just going to say now for the rest of the thing.
And that is a really hot topic at the moment now. So Ken Robinson, all his TED Talks about exactly that, and about that whole theory of we don't know what the jobs of the future are going to be. Times are moving so quickly. Are you really in it to kind of just teach children to sit still and follow instructions? Because that isn't the future. The future is about being sparky, being creative, and also that thing about there's another TED Talk, it's brilliant, it's I think I've mentioned it on here before, it's that bloke who, he's not anything to do with education, he's like a business bloke, he's like an international business
Steve Jobs
analyst guy, can't remember, and there was some kind of forum, and he made this statement, it was all on the press at the time, about not just the jobs of the future, but like robots basically, and so robots and artificial intelligence. Do you remember that?
He's a Japanese man, and he is the leader of it's like the equivalent of World Health Organization. It's the World Education Organization, when he basically made a very wide statement where he said, if a robot can do it now, whatever the price of that robot, do not teach your children to do it, because what we need is
all the soft skills,
soft
it's the things
skills,
that
emotional
robots can't
learning,
do. Yeah.
and just saying that, and I think that's worth
Art,
saying is
culture.
like the rate of technology from about mid 1800s cranks up at such a speed that it is difficult for humans as societies to understand that you can have something that you go 20 years ago that was something that employed half of a population, and today it's done by 2 machines and it's done so much cheaper, and education is struggling to kind of come to terms with that. And I do think part of what this paragraph where he's talking about the increasing uselessness maybe of school is he's not quite entering into the fact that, and it's as much as it is a very difficult thing to say, there is a large part of the schooling system, I think, that is childcare, that is babysitting, and that is keeping a workforce away from us.
That's kind of my take on it, in a way that I don't get from this article that he is particularly pro home ed. From this article, I don't get that he's saying don't do school anymore. He's talking about rejuvenating it and definitely having more emphasis on family. So he's talking about projects where he sent like a mother and her daughter to visit the police and to apologise for like littering a beach, and then learning about local police procedures and all this kind of stuff, and it being more embedded in community and responsibility and family, which is great. But I don't get from here that he's saying close down state education.
No. I think he's saying schooling. So there's a bit somewhere where he's saying it's not the fault, possibly on the second page here. He's saying that he doesn't think it's the fault of schools. He just thinks the system, the way it's set up, is not able to deliver what children in society need. So it's not going like they're bad teachers. It's not saying that they don't care, because that's completely the opposite of, that's not even what someone who's quite anti-school think. I don't think there are, I think there are some bad teachers, but I think the large part of the teaching workforce is people who care a whole lot and have their hands tied and are stuck in something that
and just
isn't
institutionalized,
serving,
it's just like because I'm sure we've both been there in terms of just getting if your focus just getting narrower and narrower and narrower, doesn't it, once you're working in a school. So when you go into it, you've got this vision of like working with children and it being this vocation basically, and then you get part of the system until all you are really thinking about and stressing about is not even your whole class, but like the couple of kids in your class who aren't meeting their target,
that are read on your file or something
that Michael Gove has decided.
But that's partly I think that's partly there's two bits to that. Part of it is, I think what John Gatto is pushing for is mentoring, not education, in the way that he is like you act as almost like, they have Big Brother initiatives in America and in different parts of Europe, where that's kind of like a third party outside of your family who just says, like, I think this would be valued, go and see the police officer, go and see whatever else. But also having come from a teaching background that we both have, you know that your priorities are in some ways dictated to you by self-preservation. And I've said it before, and I say it a lot of times, nobody would come in if your class were... They would come in eventually, I guess, if you had a very upset class. But you'd be chewed out a lot quicker if they weren't writing the dates in their books. And so you are incentivized to go, right, well, that's what I have to do then. Or that's, and then you get these people that come into teaching, like you say, with this big vocational, I'm going to be... And I think what people have in their heads is that they're going to be mentors. They're going to have, one-to-one conversations and really dig down into what is it, and maybe I can be the one that...
And I'm sure there are people doing that, and they're probably people without their own children, I would say, definitely, in the current system. But going back to the point you made about it being childcare, that is for me like a hurdle which I don't understand how you would leap over. You can't.
It's a very big societal shift. It's not something that you can.
I also don't see how, if you're purely basing your education system in individual families, I think you're therefore cutting a lot of opportunities for learning and for education, because if you've got a family that are available and able to provide educational opportunities for their children that are completely child-led and tailored for that child, then fantastic. But there are lots of people who just aren't in that position.
Well, I think he's talking in a different bit about the idea that so like you say, if you just said everybody now has to have their kids with them all the time, that's massive for a society. You're going to decimate a workforce and you're going to do whatever. And I think actually it's not looking at it as like taking time off and taking your kids to art club and taking them to whatever club. It's more about, and I'm not sure if he says it in this explicitly, but he writes in one of his other books that it seems insane that our goal is for children to act and behave as adults do in the world. And so to do that, we shield them completely from the adult world and put them in a room of people who are the same. Let's say because of the way demographics work, mostly the same social class as you, they're the same age as you, and then we go, well, why aren't you behaving like adults?
No, I disagree about that social class thing.
Well,
because I kind of feel like that's one of my reasons why I still have faith in schools, because I feel like it is a great mixing bowl. I think that there is an issue with home educating where you are only, like in its current form, where you are only mixing with people who have similar worldviews to you, people who have the same kind of income to you, which is greater than your average income, by the way, definitely, because to be able to, afford to A, not work and be able to look after your kids the whole time, and B, to go to those groups, unless you're just staying at home and you're not mixing with anybody, then the children you are going to be mixing with are going to be similar to you, whereas in a classroom of 30 kids, you are going to meet, apart from obviously the complete elite, but that is a whole other podcast. But then, about my views on private schooling.
But then I think that again is the difference between what I would foresee and what I think John Gatto would foresee is not working in order to do home ed. It's that if everybody home eded, if it was an expectation across a society that your children were with you, then you would find a lot more part-time workers, which is something that society moves towards anyway, at least recently. Is how many countries are talking about 4-day work weeks, and how many people talk about working in the mornings, and you're talking about a lot more of like some parts of the work you might bring your children with you, some parts where you go, well, I work in the morning and dad has them in the afternoon, or vice versa, or I work Monday, Thursday, and those kind of things that aren't saying drop everything and your only job is to be tied to the kitchen stove and do whatever.
What do you think about that idea, though, that so it talks in here about if we use schooling to break children away from parents, and make no mistake, that has been the central function of schools since John Cotton announced it in 1650, blah blah blah. We're going to continue the horror show we have right now. And I get what he's kind of saying about strengthening family bonds and kind of learning together and all that kind of stuff, but I've also read other stuff which talks about theories of children kind of being close to their mother for the first, this is one theory, right? Being close to their mother for the first 7 years.
This is in Raising Boys,
yes,
isn't it?
And then going more dad, and then going beyond parent to other mentor figures, you know. And if you can set that up within your education world from, at home in your family setting, then great. But I don't think it's necessarily best for all kids to be with their parents all the time, and I don't necessarily think it's good for for the parents to be with their own kids. No.
And I think there's scope for. That's why he's not saying dismantle the schooling system completely. He's saying there is a role for. I think the word I would use is mentors. There is a role for professional mentors who are, part of your community or part of whatever else it is, and they kind of, even just as a networker, to go, hey, I'll tell you what, why don't you go and see this person? That's their job that they do. Why don't you go and spend a couple of days with this person? Why don't you spend a couple of days with this person? And you would integrate so much more. And I think that there's a kind of unspoken bit about schooling in some ways, where we're thinking about schooling as like giving kids an equal opportunity, or or you know, that we're leveling the playing field, and they could all be the prime minister, because they if they go through. I mean, that's not true in this country, because if you are not in the Bullingdon Club, good luck. But what I mean is that it kind of perpetuates a cycle of spending time in schooling, in the school system, learning non before you've got like your life skills. You know, how many people are sat in a classroom being taught to dissect. I'm not saying these are invaluable tools, but what I mean is, if you are sat there dissecting Shakespeare and learning the three angles of a triangle, but you don't know how to do a shopping list, then you or you don't know how to run a household, because you're constantly taken out of people who run you're taken away from the people who are running a household. You don't get to see it, and so then you just get stuck in this loop of, well, you don't know how to do it, so then if you have kids, you might feel that you aren't worth teaching your kids. You know, that you're not, oh, there's teachers there that are better than me. And I said to my mum the other day, I said, you're a functioning adult in the world. Does your child need to be any more than that to be happy? Now, I'm aware I'm putting cat amongst the pigeons there, but I do think there's a bit of a cycle that goes on that is like, you weren't taught it, so you don't feel like you can teach your kids how to do it. And that's not to say that I
kind of think that does happen, though. I think, you're not in school 24 hours a day. I think that in most families, children are absorbing so much information about that kind of stuff that I would maybe disagree that they're not learning it. I think you are learning it. And obviously some families are going to talk about that kind of stuff more than others and address it, and some are going to keep it more private from their children. I was just thinking about, because he's talking in this article quite a lot about kind of like mentoring programs or community service, and
that's what he's done, isn't it? He's kind of disrupted the schooling system by saying, I will take these kids on and
it's all about
them.
responsibilities and stuff like that, which is all cool. I just wondered about where he doesn't mention play, and I just wonder where
he is predominantly working with children who are 15 to 18. So that's not to say that play doesn't exist in those spaces. He's working in, from memory, I think he's working in inner city New York with children who are late teenagers, let's say. So,
because that's another thing about school. So if you were to rehaul, so 20% of kids' school life is spent at playtime. So that is a huge percentage of their time that if they're in the school system, that is open-ended, you would hope, free time with their peers, which children in sort of hunter-gatherer societies, not that there's many of them left now, spend all their day doing that, just off with their own peers and independently learning through play. And I'm not confident that the current system in the UK priorities, I'm sure it doesn't prioritise play enough in terms of, it's just like lunchtime is for eating and for getting some fresh air and running around a bit and then coming in, and it's not necessarily, there's some places it completely is, and they get it and they're doing amazing work at playtime, but a lot of places just don't have the resources.
As you say,
the
20% of a day is a long time for the school
just
to kind of write off and just hold their hands up and go, that's not our responsibility. It does tie into a bit that I've highlighted here, which is I'm going to read it because it's his maths, and it's a bit that I think doesn't quite follow on. So here's the calculations that he's done for his children. Out of a 168-hour week, my children sleep for 56, so that leaves them awake for 112 hours. That's how long they've got to make a personality, to be a functioning person. Children attend school 30 hours a week and spend about 6 hours a week getting ready, going and coming home, and spend an average of 7 hours a week in homework, which is 45 hours. During that time, they're under constant surveillance. They have no private time, private space, and are disciplined if they try to assert their individuality in the use of time or space. So we're talking about long stretches of times. Now, this is the bit that I disagree with. He says, my children watch 55 hours of television a week, according to recent reports. That leaves them with 12 hours a week with which to make a personality. Now, this is the bit I would argue with, because that works out to roughly 8 hours a day.
Right. Wow.
Which is big, but I'm not saying it wasn't true in 1990, and I don't believe that he would say it if it wasn't from a report. Then he said, of course, my kids eat, and that takes some time. Not much, because we've lost the tradition of family dining. But if we allot 3 hours a week to evening meals, so over the whole week, 3 hours, that gives you a net amount of private time for your child of 9 hours a week, in which they're to form a personality, to be introspective, and to that's the only time that they're not, with themselves. Now, so let's take the maths and slightly skew it, because I don't know that I think that the mood on television has shifted in that I think 8 hours a week. I don't think anybody would say, 8 hours is what my kids...
A day. Yeah.
So I think most people, let's half that, shall we? But that still is a huge amount of time.
It's quite interesting what he says about the richer the child, the less TV they watch.
Yes,
which
but did you follow the next bit up? Because he says the richer the child, the less TV they watch. But on average, it says... The rich kid's time is just as narrowly prescribed by a somewhat broader catalogue of commercial entertainments. His inevitable assignment to a series of private lessons in areas seldom his actual choice.
Yeah.
So I think he's making the point that, yes, TV isn't perhaps a thing in higher income families, but that's no more free time, that's no more personal building time, that's a lot more.
I like what he says about higher income families and upper class children spending time learning, not realising they're learning necessarily, but being in situations of great challenge. So he's talking about like children under 10 being in control of a horse, and so you're on top of a horse, and what are you going to do if it starts to gallop, and how are you going to manage that situation? And I'd say that is definitely, that whole thing about the private school system in England is definitely giving children more of those opportunities, isn't it? It's giving them children that I know that are in private school are at a very young age doing things like going off onto Exmoor for several days and navigating themselves through difficult terrain and all this kind of stuff. And it is very interesting to see that as a learning opportunity, as a kind of, you are just left to confront this challenge, and how are you going to do it, and how is that going to wire your brain and give you the confidence and all this kind of stuff. I had this idea when I was still teaching. I remember boring my other half to absolute tears about it. I was like, right, I've redesigned the education system. I've done it. This is secondary school.
Brilliant.
I was like, I want to do this. I'm going to write an article about it. Everyone's going to read it, and the Prime Minister's going to phone me and go, yes, you've nailed it, Gemma. You've done it. Which I think kind of ties in slightly to what he's saying, where I was like, okay, right. What if you redesigned?
If you were some sort of education czar.
If you were the education czar, and everyone has to do what. Actually, let's call it dictator, right? Education dictator, because everyone has to do what you say.
Okay.
You just put all assessment in the bin, all of it, all assessment in the bin.
Okay, I'm with you.
And so
I love it.
And so then people might go, oh yeah, but how are you going to assess the progress that you're making? Well, you trust teachers to know children as individuals. So you have smaller class sizes, and you have a little study group, you might call it, of like 10 kids that you're their tutor, and it, much more cross-curricular. So why do you have to narrow everything down when they get to secondary school? What's the point of that?
Yeah.
So you have your small little tutor group, and you do much more independent learning with them, because really they can find out for them. If you teach them how to teach themselves and find out what they need to find out, and you support them, so they go, I really need to speak.
I've got a clever person word.
Go on.
Autodidactic.
Yes. So
yes. It's the ability to teach yourself.
The internet, B, real people like you're kind of saying. So as the tutor, a kid was, I've got this idea and I really want to find out about blah, and you go, okay, cool, I think you need to talk to a tree surgeon. I'm going to hook you up with a tree surgeon. I'm going to phone them. I'm going to set up that meeting. I'm going to go with you because it's weird and all that kind of stuff. And then at the end of school, you could have because you might think as well, oh, how are employers going to know, apart from an interview, how are you going to put on your CV or your grades, or how are we going to sort people and rate them? And you don't need to rate people. You don't need to grade them in an order of any kind, do you? Why? Our whole society is built on this thing of this is the best person and this is the shittest person.
It begs the question that if you asked employers now, does the current system predict good employees or poor employees? I think every employer, well, not every, I think a lot of employers would say, no, give me 6 weeks of them coming in and I'll tell you if they're good or not. I don't give a monkeys about their A levels or their whatever, or
so if they have their like independent study, right, that they're just doing all the time, and then you as a tutor might go, right, assess your group and go, oh, do you know what? None of them are particularly numerate at the moment. We are going to do it with numeracy stuff now, and I'm going to lead a bit of this. So you know you're just very skilled and trusted, and you might have some chats about what's going on at the moment, and that's going to, you know,
general studies,
and oh crikey, none of you know how to do this. Okay, we're going to spend 5 minutes on this right now, but now cool, back to your projects. And then you could imagine when a kid gets to like 17, 18, they have their independent project, a bit like a kind of PhD thesis with a viva at the end, so they can do that in whatever they want. If that is like an art exhibition, that's cool. If it is like a novel, that's cool. If it is like taking a car to bits and put it back together again, that's cool. If they want to stand up and present that, that's cool. Or, you know, if they want to invite the community to come and watch and celebrate their achievements, fantastic. And then when you are going for a job interview, you are writing about your project or projects in your application letter. You've got something to talk about. You know,
and presumably you would have. You're unlikely to be jumping into the dark in terms of industry. You know, you would have done as part of your special project. You would have gone, oh, I'm going to go and have a talk to these accountants, or I'm going to go and do something else. Yep. So you would have even more that network reconnects where you could go, actually, even if you're moving county, you could say, could you phone Jones's solicitors? I've been doing my independent project with them, and I think they would be able to, in a 5-minute conversation.
Yeah, and you might even end up, you know, that kind of merging into apprenticeships as well. That part of your project involved you talking to a tree surgeon or a vet, through talking with them and learning about that job and for your projects. They go, oh, you're great, I'm going to take you under my wing, and there you go, there's the job.
What John Gatto's doing here with his... so this is similar to what he's doing, isn't it? He's saying to children they have to do, it's something like 300 hours of community service in a year as part of his thing, and they have to feed back to him about it, and they have to be doing it. And I think that kind of touches on this idea that, like, and it ties in again to this childcare idea, but it's this idea that, like, children are useless until they're 18, which is completely untrue. How many job sites, you know, I'm thinking, you know, you're talking masonry trade, right? There are jobs that a 10-year-old properly I'm advocating for, like, I'm not advocating for that. That's not where I'm going. But what I'm saying is, as an experience, it's not to look at it and go, oh, they wouldn't want the bother of children being there. Children could be useful.
Completely.
Children, you know, and they would. Yes,
and also I think there's a thing
and they
about,
work
like,
for so much less. And they're tiny. You have to pay them nothing, is it?
But they, I think as well, people underestimate. I can imagine if you put that proposal to somebody, people go, "Oh yeah, but where's the motivation? Unless you've got that threat of, like, unless you study, then you won't get your grades." It's like, there is no assessment. There's no grading of that. Like, you pass or fail. You just do it or you don't do it. I think you've got to have the faith and the trust in young people that they want to learn, actually, and they do want to learn if they're given the freedom to and the opportunity to do what they want to do. And I think you've just got to have that as a given, as part of human nature, that if you put children in a space and time where you're like, well, this is your time now, no one's forcing you to do anything, but here are all these ideas around you, here are all these opportunities, we can help you to do this, and then they do feel like it's got something to do with their own future rather than. And
also, I mean, again, if we take a big step back chronologically, and you look at the human experience as it exists, there is a tiny blip at the end of that timeline that says children do not spend time with their parents, they go to a school. The rest of human history is children either, as you say, out playing until they're ready to be a part of the community routines in some way and helping out, or they were out in the field with, you have to be with mum and dad as they move the ox up and down the field. You have to learn how the thing works, or you go, right, you're going to spend the afternoon with the blacksmith, right? You're going to go and, the church is there, and you're going to spend, a couple of hours there every week. And when there were 6 jobs in your village, it was easier to move around. I think, again, coming back to what we were saying at the start, where now the job spectrum is so broad and everything is changing so much, and also the depth of knowledge that you have to get into, like algorithmic programming, for example. If you don't start that until you get to the time when the state education says, well, this is when coding comes in. You are far behind. People, I think that's the biggest thing that I see from this kind of education, of mentoring and going and seeing things, is going, right, but you can get such a, we could get, as a society, you get so much better people, because you go, right, he's been into it since he was 5, and then he's absolutely
zoned in. There's so much research that
and
says that teenagers are basically geniuses in some ways, because their neural connections are so quick. And
they're so plasticky.
Actually, they could be solving some massive problems, climate change and all the rest of it, that adults just can't, are still like, ugh.
Do you know what it is, though? That is nature's, like, massive trick. Or not trick, it's like a bit of a troll, isn't it? And they go, when your brain's the most plastic, and you could solve anything. I'm going to give you a bucket of hormones so that and that kind of ties in. So I'm not saying for a second, like, let's have a 15-year-old prime minister, because the second, like, there's a girl.
But let's let them vote, though. Let's let them vote. That would be great.
I think that I mean, this is a whole separate topic, but I think less people should be allowed to vote.
Come on.
No,
you don't believe.
I do. I think you should have to own at least 30 acres and be a man. No, I don't think that at all. I do think, but part of the part of not having a community responsibility, and then we in our political system, the elections can be called at irregular intervals, and there's no impetus for us to pay. There's very little impetus for us to pay attention to politics, and then suddenly go, right, you decide who's in charge, and the vast majority of the population is going to go, huh? Gogglebox was on, and I was watching that, and then in the microwave.
They brainwashed you, man. They brainwashed you. That's what they want you to do.
It's a large responsibility.
I won't bother about that. Oh, they must know better than us because they went to Eton. So
that's not what I think at all. No, that's not what I think at all.
Can I just say this? I mean, like, I think we just need to make this clear on the blurb about this issue. Episode. That the links to Forest School here are tenuous. I mean, this is all about education. Yeah,
it is about education. No, I think it is, because this is in my world, in my imaginary head palace. What I'm talking about here is either stepping away from, we have let's say sidestepped state education in what we do for the most part, because we've set up an independent school and gone, we're going to do this.
But I'm not though.
You can get in the bin.
No, but I'm here, and then my kids are in state education, and so I have kind of my foot.
I'm not saying that.
My feet in both camps.
But I do think, in terms of linking to Forest School, in terms of, now, I have talked before about being secret missions, and this being a bit of a
secret mission
cult that we're going to encourage people. So I think Forest School teachers are in the best possible place to be going, right,
start the revolution.
I've been employed to do a child-led program that is outdoors, that is connected to the children's real world, but because Forest School is the buzzword at the moment, you are allowed into a school and given access to the children.
And the staff sometimes, when you can just observe, stand next to the teacher and be like, isn't this great, teacher? Check out this learning. Actually, they're not just braining each other with a stick.
They've stopped that now.
I know they did that last week, but now you can see how they're flourishing and frolicking. And
that kid's eye looks fine now. No, I do. What I think Forest School teachers should be at least aware of other broader sort of educational ideas, because this links very closely to that idea of Forest School. I think to some extent, depending on where you land on the spectrum, if you land on the spectrum if you land on the we're doing Egyptians, and we're going to go outside and we're going to make a
and there are lots of people doing that still. Right? And then I think the longer they spend just doing if you're a teacher that has a class and you teach your class in the curriculum that is defined by the government, and then you also do a bit of Forest School every week, then you're going to find it's going to not be such a quick process, I would say. But if you have been a teacher and then now you are just Forest Weirdy, then you are inevitably going to slide down that spectrum of what? And start challenging those givens that you just accepted.
Because you will see what children are capable of when given, this much free space and this much free space and this much free space. And I think
So basically,
but
we should
no,
have a direct line,
so-
right, to
so-
the education people to go, hey, listen, and to do research.
Oh, that
gets
would not
published
be
and
good. Can you
listen.
imagine if I could phone them whenever I was in a bit of a mood and just go...
Well, not you,
Le-
obviously. I'm not including you,
No.
because you're off the end of the spectrum. The weird.
But what I was going to say was, if there's the spectrum of we're doing Egyptian, so we're going to go out and make shadoofs, and
What should do?
it's like a crane, but you with water weights for moving
okay.
bricks and stuff. And then there's the other end of the spectrum, which I think I sit more towards, which is particularly for our home ed days, where sometimes I will go, I need to go and cut that tree down and chop it up for firewood and bring it back. That is just the adult world. That is just functioning as a person in this setting. That is a job that needs to be done. Come and do it with me. You won't be able to use the chainsaw, or you might not be able to fell the whole thing, but as much as you can, I would like you to be involved in the process. And I think that is where I feel I'm going, come on, let me show you what the adult world looks like. Let me
And you can actually help. Like
Yeah.
most people would make you feel like you can't help because you are a child, but actually you are of value and you can help. Yeah. I
And
think
like we
that's
talked
really-
about the woodland management thing, where I'm going, chopping firewood is incredibly useful. Thank you.
And fun.
And no, I'm not going to lie and say the children are just as quick as I am at doing firewood. Of course they're not, but it's a bit like, was it a useful experience for them? Immeasurably useful for them. Do they feel part of the community? Yes, they definitely do.
Is
Have
it
they
physically healthy for them? Yes, it is. Apart from that time that they chopped their leg off. But apart from that,
Don't talk about him.
That never happened. No one's ever chopped their leg off. Touch wood, all the wood. The blood is pumping and your heart is more healthy, and all of those good chemicals are going through your brain, and all the rest of
And
it.
if we're tying it back to what you were saying earlier about only wealthier or more upper class families being given a horse and saying this is your entire responsibility, and tying that into a forest school where we're saying, if we say to kids,
you're in charge of the fire.
You're in charge of the fire. You're in charge of this fucking axe.
Yeah.
Like, the
You're in
risk is
charge
very
of
real.
the meal. I mean, yesterday there was a child who was like, "Oh, shall I light the fire?" I was like, "Actually, yeah, we need another fire, so you do it." And it took him ages, and there was, about 20
matter.
times there was that impulse of me going, "What can I do to help him?" Nothing. What? Oh, how can I make this easy for him? You can't. Just stop.
Yeah.
Oh, but I could just no, step away. Don't look. And then he did it, and it took him ages, but he did it, and it was a necessary. It wasn't just a fun. That was. And that is a thing, exactly as you're saying, kind of functional activities, which they are choosing to do them. It's not like you have to do that now. No, you can't go and play. They are choosing. And that's kind of what I mean about giving them the respect and the trust that they will want to do it. Because I think a lot of people who don't work with children will think, well, they won't do it, will they? What's in it for them? They're not going to be motivated to do it. And that's just
And I think
humans are.
if I can tie it back to my experience of teaching and what I see a lot in state teaching is because the curriculum dictates so prescriptively things like all 7-year-olds will do Egyptians. Now that's not how prescriptive our curriculum is in this country, but within a few
It
years
is within counties, though.
Yeah, but let's say you get that, and then your experience is right, I've got to sell Egyptians to my class, even though some of them aren't most of them aren't interested in it, and most of them aren't this, and so you get into this idea that you've got to sell the learning for them to be interested, and you go, well, they're not particularly interested in it, and then you might start to develop this idea that actually children, they're not motivated in the learning because look at how hard I had to bribe, threaten, do whatever so that they'd do the Egyptians, and rather than taking a step back and going, maybe Egyptians wasn't the fucking thing they wanted to do, we get, people look at it and go, yeah, well, they would just sit around. They wouldn't do anything. And you go, when have you seen a child sit around and do nothing?
Yeah.
When have you seen a child? And I was, we talk about, again,
Sometimes we want them to do that.
sometimes I'm desperate for my children to do nothing. Just sit
Sometimes it's
completely
like,
still.
how about we just... Hey, what are we doing now?
Not at Forest
Hey,
School,
Lewis,
my children at
Lewis,
home.
What are we doing now?
Yeah, we're talking. No, my son is in a why stage.
chilling out. We're
Why?
chilling out right
Why
now.
is that one? Or which one? Which one is it? I'm going to put my socks on.
Yeah.
Which one is it?
But why?
Which on my socks is it?
Why?
Anyway, I completely lost my train of thought now. You've derailed me.
I need a wee.
Okay, well let's...
Can we stop now?
Stop now. We've fixed the world.
Yeah.
You're going to redo schools in secondary,
Yeah.
and I'm not allowed a phone call.
But does it make you well, my last point is,
Yeah.
well, I know what your answer's going to be, because I say this quite often. It's like, sometimes we have a chat like this, I still think, I want to, now that I've seen
Do you think, is it
this
fixable?
other way. Well, also, and about like, don't you want to go in just a little bit and just like change the system from the inside, which I think is what John Gatto is kind of saying, is like, well, that's what he's doing, that's why he's won this amazing award. It's like, go back in now that you have your kind of moment and your eyes have been opened, and then you just go in and you're the teacher with the class that is like, yeah.
No,
No,
not at all. And do you know what I think? It is partly I am worried about how strong the system is.
It would
so
break you
I
again.
don't think that I could go in. I don't think I could pass a teaching interview now.
Oh,
I don't. I don't think I
true.
could get through any of that. And I
Yeah.
don't think I could play the game enough because I am because I am just stubborn as a person. I don't think I could sit there and go, I'll mark all the books, but secretly I'm also getting them to go and see the police station. I'd go, fuck the books, let's go and spend more time at the police station. And so I couldn't fix it. That's maybe how I feel. I couldn't fix it.
You're probably right, considering that, like, when I left that job, as I said to you before, my boss's like leaving speech about me was just like, yeah, Gemma's leaving now. If you ever want to like see something really funny, just get her to like talk about education and just laugh at how angry she gets. That's all I've got to say about Gemma. Bye. I was like, thanks, dude.
Joke's on him, you got a podcast.
It was a her, actually.
Joke's
Gender.
Oh
my God. Yeah, so, you know.
Okay.
Yeah.
We will put links to John's speech in there, and I will put links to his books, and if it's sparked anyone's interest or imagination, I would read it. I would read this speech first, because this speech sums a lot of it up. And it's only, we've got it on 4 pages, so not even 4 pages, 3.5. So have a little read. And let us know if you think that we are absolutely nuts.
Okay, bye.
Cool. Bye!
Oh, my ass is cold.
If you're in the UK and you want to come down to Children of the Forest in person and do a little bit of training with us, we've got a load of dates on all the way through this next academic year. If you go to our Facebook page or our website, you'll be able to see all the dates and the titles of the courses, and make sure you've got your ticket as soon as possible. They're all small groups so that we can do as much personalised learning as possible. In March, we've got a course on storytelling, music and drama. In April, a course in general outdoor learning involving a level 1 in forest school qualification. In May, we've got an outdoor cooking course, and in June, we've got an introduction to whittling. And if you feel like going for the big fish and you want to start your own forest school or become a qualified leader, in April this year we're starting our level 3 training courses. So you can come down to Children of the Forest for a whole week and spend some time with me and Gemma and learn how to run our very own forest school. So to find out all the dates and to get booked into those courses, go either to our Facebook page or to our website, which is childrenoftheforest.com.